Yellowstone National Park is famous for its beauty, geysers, and wildlife, but it's also home to something much more dangerous than a grizzly bear. Buried beneath the park is one of the world's largest supervolcanoes that has the potential to wipe out all life on Earth. So, is it about to erupt, and will any of us be around to see it? That's what we'll explore today. If you think Mount St. Helens or Krakatoa are scary, they're just small fry compared to Yellowstone's supervolcano. Over the last 2 million years, it's had 3 massive eruptions, each capable of destroying everything in a 300-mile radius. The largest of these occurred 640,000 years ago, when a magma chamber 6 miles beneath the Earth ruptured, unleashing a plume of ash that reached 20 miles into the atmosphere. This eruption was so powerful that it's estimated that 2,800 cubic miles of material was ejected from the volcano, an amount so vast it's difficult to wrap your mind around. To put it another way, this single event dumped more material onto the surrounding landscape than every single person who has ever lived. But despite this truly astronomical amount of rock being blasted into the air, scientists don't expect the supervolcano to erupt again for another 70,000 years. And even if it did, the chances of anyone being killed is virtually nil. Why? Because Yellowstone is a supervolcano, which means it's not like other volcanoes. Unlike their more explosive cousins, most of its eruptions occur below the surface. And while there are plenty of hotspots across the park, there are no active lava flows. The reason for this is that instead of being made up of hard, solid rock, Yellowstone's magma chamber consists of a thick, sluggish magma called magma. The magma is so dense that it can't support its own weight, and instead slowly oozes upwards towards the surface, where it spreads out over a large area, releasing steam and sulfur. This means that instead of building up pressure and having a giant explosion, Yellowstone's magma simply leaks out onto the land below. This process is known as effusive eruption, and it's not nearly as dramatic as its explosive counterpart. In fact, there have only been 2 explosive eruptions in the last 15 million years, and both occurred when magma managed to break through the surface and form a lava dome. These domes eventually collapsed, causing pyroclastic flows and enormous ash plumes. But this type of activity is rare. For the most part, Yellowstone is a slow-burning backwater by volcanic standards. So if the big one does happen, what would it look like? The first sign that something was wrong would be an increase in seismic activity. In the weeks before the eruption, there would be hundreds of earthquakes with magnitudes ranging from 3 to 5. This would be followed by ground deformation as the magma began to rise. Steam and gases would start to emerge from the cracks in the earth, and the whole area would smell like rotten eggs. But despite this ominous build-up, the actual eruption itself wouldn't be very noticeable at first. Instead of a towering column of smoke and fire, there would be a slight bulge in the ground and a faint glow coming from beneath the surface. As the magma continued to rise, however, things would get more intense. At some point, the pressure would become too great, and a fountain of molten rock would shoot up into the air. This would be accompanied by an otherworldly light show as the gases in the magma combine with oxygen and explode into massive fireballs. As the magma chamber empties, the ground would collapse in on itself, leaving behind a massive crater. Hot rock and ash would rain down on the surrounding area, and pyroclastic flows would race across the landscape at 150 miles per hour. The immediate blast zone would be 200 miles in diameter, leveling forests and turning everything to ash. Further away from the epicenter, a thick layer of ash would blanket the entire Midwest, killing everything in its path. Even further away, people would experience several days of total darkness as the ash blocked out the sun. But the worst effects would be felt closer to home. An earthquake swarm would shake the region as the magma chamber emptied, triggering landslides, mudslides, and damaging buildings. Pyroclastic flows would carve new valleys into the landscape, and debris would continue to rain down for weeks or even months. Within the blast zone, everything would be incinerated or buried under tons of ash. Outside of it, a thick layer of ash would blanket the entire Midwest, killing everything in its path. even further away, people would experience several days of total darkness as the ash blotted out the sun. Thankfully, none of this is likely to happen anytime soon. The last major eruption occurred 640,000 years ago, which means that Yellowstone has been quiet for most of human history. In fact, our ancestors probably had better things to worry about, like getting eaten by saber-toothed tigers. But even during the last ice age, when humans were making cave paintings and burying their dead, Yellowstone didn't erupt. This is because the supervolcano follows its own internal clock, one that doesn't care about human affairs. It erupts when it feels like it needs to, regardless of what's going on in the outside world, and right now it's dozing peacefully beneath the park. But what if it didn't? What if Yellowstone erupted tomorrow? Would we actually be able to survive it? The good news is that Yellowstone's eruptions are not like those of other volcanoes. While Mount Vesuvius might have wiped out Pompeii in 79 AD, Yellowstone's eruptions are more akin to the Icelandic variety, which rarely take any lives. For example, in 1783, the Laki eruption in Iceland released 240 billion cubic feet of gas and 14 cubic miles of ash into the atmosphere. Despite this, only 9 people died. The reason for this is that Yellowstone's eruptions are so slow and predictable that evacuating the area is a viable option. The first stage of an eruption would be marked by increased seismic activity, which would give people several hours or even days to leave. The second stage would be marked by the emergence of magma, which would give people several weeks to evacuate. By the time the third stage begins, however, it would be too late. Ash and pumice would be raining down from the sky, and pyroclastic flows would be racing across the landscape. People would need to move out of the entire blast zone, which includes parts of Montana, Wyoming, and Idaho. But once the ash started falling, it would be impossible to do so. The only option left would be to stay indoors and hope for the best. But how bad would things really be? In terms of deaths, not that bad. It's estimated that between 5,000 and 10,000 people live within the blast zone, meaning that the vast majority of people would be able to evacuate. Those who stayed behind would likely die from ash inhalation, but it's unlikely that anyone would be incinerated or buried alive. In terms of property damage, however, things would be much worse. Thousands of homes and buildings would be destroyed, and the cost of rebuilding would be astronomical. Crops would be destroyed, and food supplies would dwindle, leading to widespread famine. Worldwide temperatures would plummet, and the ash would eventually make its way into the air we breathe, causing respiratory problems. In short, the world as we know it would come to an end. But would this be the end of humanity? No. There are plenty of bunkers and survival shelters scattered across the country where the rich and powerful could ride out the storm. And there are even underground facilities built to withstand nuclear blasts that could easily protect the average citizen. In fact, some people are already preparing for Yellowstone's next eruption. One such person is Paul, aka the Prepper, who has spent the last 10 years stockpiling food, water, and other supplies in anticipation of the disaster. He even has a Faraday cage to protect his electronics from electromagnetic pulses. Paul's prepping has been mocked by many, but if Yellowstone erupts, he'll be one of the lucky ones. So, what should you do? If Yellowstone were to erupt tomorrow, the first thing you need to do is stay informed. Pay attention to the news and follow the instructions of local authorities. If told to evacuate, do so immediately. If not, stay inside and away from windows. Next, you need to protect yourself from the ash. Wear a gas mask if you have one, otherwise make a makeshift one out of a towel and duct tape. Cover your mouth and nose and avoid breathing through them. You also need to protect your eyes from the ash, so wear goggles or sunglasses if you have them. Otherwise, wear a scarf or bandana. Finally, you need to prepare for the long haul. Stock up on food and water, and make sure you have a way to cook it. Make sure you have a flashlight, radio, and other supplies that will help you survive without power or running water. It's also important to remember that after the eruption, there will be looting and rioting. People will be desperate and will do anything to survive. So if possible, stay out of sight. lock your doors and windows and don't go outside unless you have to. Surviving Yellowstone's eruption won't be easy, but if you're prepared, you'll be able to make it through. So, are you ready? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more videos like this one. Thanks for watching.